At 4,200 meters, the human eye can barely distinguish a person from a rock. The wind shifts every few seconds. Temperature variations create invisible air currents, and the Earth's rotation itself becomes a factor in your calculations. Most military snipers consider anything beyond 2,000 meters to be entering the realm of pure luck rather than skill. But on a scorching Tuesday morning in the Nevada desert, Staff Sergeant Marcus Chun was about to redefine what the word impossible meant to an entire unit of America's most elite soldiers. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The bet was simple. Hit a playing card at a distance that would make seasoned marksmen laugh. The stakes? The respect of the 7th Special Operations Squadron and a month's worth of cleaning duties for the loser. What nobody expected was that this quiet demolitions expert from Sacramento was carrying a secret that would leave grown men speechless and questioning everything they thought they knew about precision shooting. The morning started like any other. At Nellis Air Force Base, the desert sun was already brutal at 0600 hours, and the 7th Special Operations Squadron was preparing for another day of advanced tactical training. Staff Sergeant Marcus Chun sat alone at a metal table in the mess hall, methodically eating his breakfast while reviewing demolitions manuals. At 28, Marcus had earned a reputation as the unit's go-to explosives expert, but he kept to himself, preferring technical specifications to the usual military bravado that filled the barracks. "Hey, demo boy." The voice belonged to Staff Sergeant Jake Hawkins, a mountain of a man from Texas who'd earned his stripes as the unit's top marksman. Behind him followed his usual crew, Corporal Tommy Rodriguez from Arizona, known for his tactical communications expertise, and Sergeant First Class David Miller, a reconnaissance specialist from Montana whose tracking skills were legendary throughout the base. Marcus looked up from his manual but didn't respond. He'd learned early in his military career that engaging with Hawkins usually led to some form of harassment disguised as friendly competition. "I'm talking to you, Chun," Hawkins continued, sliding into the seat across from Marcus. "Word is you've been spending time at the shooting range, trying to play with the big boys now." The truth was more complicated. Marcus had indeed been visiting the range, but not for the reasons anyone might expect. 3 weeks earlier, he'd received a letter from his younger sister Emma back in Sacramento. She was struggling in her high school ROTC program, particularly with marksmanship, and had asked for advice. Marcus had started practicing not to improve his own skills, but to better understand the fundamentals so he could help her over there. Weekly phone calls. "Just keeping current with qualifications," Marcus replied, closing his manual. Rodriguez laughed. "Come on, man. Johnson saw you out there yesterday with a long-range rifle. Since when do demolition guys need to practice at 800 meters? Marcus had borrowed the rifle from the armory to test a theory about wind compensation that Emma had asked about. His background in physics, which had made him exceptional with explosives calculations, had led him to approach marksmanship from a purely mathematical perspective. Where other soldiers relied on instinct and experience, Marcus saw trajectories, atmospheric pressure differentials, and Coriolis effects. "Maybe our demo expert thinks he can outshoot real marksmen," Miller chimed in, his Montana drawl carrying a hint of mockery. "What do you think, Jake? Should we give him a chance to embarrass himself?" Hawkins leaned back in his chair, a predatory smile spreading across his face. He was the undisputed shooting champion of the 7th Squadron, with confirmed kills at distances that had earned him commendations and the grudging respect of even the most hardened veterans. His personal best was a confirmed hit at 2,847 meters during a deployment in Afghanistan, a shot that had become unit legend. "I'll tell you what, Chun," Hawkins said, his voice carrying across the mess hall and drawing attention from nearby tables. "You think you can handle a real rifle? Let's make this interesting. Marcus felt the familiar knot in his stomach that came whenever he became the center of attention. He preferred the precision and predictability of explosives to the chaos of human interaction. But something in Hawkins' tone triggered a defensive response he hadn't felt since high school. "What did you have in mind?" Marcus asked quietly. The mess hall had grown noticeably quieter, with conversations at neighboring tables dying down as soldiers sensed drama brewing. Hawkins stood up, clearly enjoying the audience. "Range day is Thursday. We'll have access to the Barrett M82s and the long-range course. I'm thinking we start you off easy, maybe 1,500 meters. See if you can hit a man-sized target before we move to anything serious. And if I can?" Marcus asked, immediately regretting the question. Hawkins' grin widened. "Well, if you can consistently hit at 1,500, maybe we bump it up. But let's be honest, Immo boy, you'll be lucky to hit the berm." The casual dismissal stung more than Marcus expected. He thought about Emma, struggling with confidence in her own ROTC program, facing her own doubts and dismissive classmates. He thought about the calculations he'd been working on, the theories about long-range shooting that had been occupying his mind for weeks. What are the stakes? Marcus heard himself asking. Rodriguez whistled low. "Now it's getting interesting." "Simple." Hawkins replied. "You miss your shots Thursday. You handle my cleaning duties for a month. Barracks, gear, weapons, the works. And you stay away from the long-range course. Leave the real shooting to the professionals. And if I hit my shots, you won't," Miller said flatly. "But if by some miracle you do, I'll handle your demo. Lab cleanup for 2 weeks. Deal?" Marcus knew he should walk away. He was a demolitions expert, not a marksman. His job was to calculate explosive yields and timer mechanisms, not to engage in testosterone-fueled competitions with the unit's alpha males. But the image of Emma, doubting herself because some instructor had told her she didn't have the natural ability for marksmanship, wouldn't leave his mind. "Deal," Marcus said, extending his hand. Hawkins shook it with the confidence of a man who'd never lost a shooting competition. "This is going to be fun. Hope you're ready to learn some humility, Chun." As the group dispersed, Marcus returned to his demolitions manual, but the equations and diagrams blurred together. He'd just committed himself to a public humiliation, and he had less than 48 hours to prepare. The rational part of his mind cataloged all the reasons this was a terrible idea. He had minimal long-range experience, no formal sniper training, and would be competing against the best marksman in the squadron. But another part of his mind, the part that had always been fascinated by precision and mathematical perfection, was already calculating variables: wind speed and direction, temperature gradients, humidity effects on bullet trajectory, the Coriolis effect at extended ranges. These were just numbers, equations to be solved. And Marcus had always been exceptional at solving equations. That evening, Marcus made his way to the base library, a small, underutilized building that most soldiers avoided. He checked out every manual on long-range shooting, ballistics, and atmospheric effects he could find. By 2,200 hours, his small barracks room looked like a graduate-level physics classroom, with papers covered in calculations scattered across. His desk and floor. The mathematics were beautiful in their complexity. At extended ranges, a bullet's path becomes a three-dimensional curve influenced by dozens of variables that most shooters handle through intuition and experience. But Marcus saw patterns, correlations, and predictable relationships that could be quantified and controlled. He worked through the night, calculating theoretical trajectories for different atmospheric conditions, mapping wind effect coefficients, and developing what amounted to a mathematical model for precision shooting. When Reveille sounded at 0530, Marcus had filled 3 notebooks with equations and had developed something no one expected: confidence. The next day passed in a blur of regular duties and anticipation. Word of the bet had spread throughout the POO. squadron, and Marcus found himself the subject of curious stares and whispered conversations. Some soldiers offered encouragement, but most seemed to view Thursday's range day as entertainment, a chance to watch the quiet demolitions. Expert learn a harsh lesson about overconfidence. Wednesday evening, Marcus requested permission to visit the range for practice. The range officer, Sergeant Patricia Walsh, was surprised to see him checking out a Barrett M82 and several boxes of .50 caliber ammunition. "Planning something special, Chun?" she asked, noting the unusual request. In her logbook, "Just want to verify some calculations," Marcus replied, which was technically true. The range after hours was peaceful, with only the distant sounds of aircraft operations breaking the desert silence. Marcus methodically set up his shooting position. At the 800-meter mark, not attempting any heroics, just focusing on fundamentals. His first shot was wide left. His second was high. But by his 10th shot, something clicked. The rifle's recoil, the sight picture, the breathing techniques, they all became components in his mathematical model. Each shot provided data points that refined his calculations. By the time he'd fired 50 rounds, Marcus was consistently hitting a 10-inch target at 800 meters, and more importantly, he understood why each shot went where it did. As he cleaned the rifle and prepared to return it to the armory, Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced since his early days working with explosives. The satisfaction of mastering a complex system through understanding rather than repetition. Tomorrow would tell whether his theoretical approach could compete with Hawkins' years of practical experience. But for the first time since accepting the bet, Marcus Chen wasn't thinking about humiliation or cleaning duties. He was thinking about the mathematics of the impossible, and wondering just how far those calculations might take him. Thursday morning arrived with the kind of crystal clear desert sky that made long-range shooting both a blessing and a curse. The lack of clouds meant perfect visibility, but it also promised temperature variations that would create challenging mirage effects by midday. Marcus had been awake since 0400, running final calculations based on the weather forecast and atmospheric pressure readings he'd obtained from the base meteorology office. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The long-range course at Nellis was a masterpiece of military engineering, stretching across 4 miles of Nevada desert, with targets positioned at intervals from 500 meters to an extreme 4,000-meter mark that was rarely used except for experimental purposes. Most training exercises focused on the 800 to 1,500-meter range, distances that represented realistic combat scenarios for special operations personnel. By 0800, word of the competition had spread beyond the 7th Squadron. Off-duty personnel from various units had found reasons to visit the range area, creating an impromptu gallery of spectators. Master Sergeant Williams, the squadron's senior non-commissioned officer, had even postponed a scheduled briefing to observe what he privately expected to be a quick and educational humiliation. Hawkins arrived at the range like a gunfighter entering a saloon, his custom shooting kit slung over his shoulder and confidence radiating from every step. His entourage had grown to include several junior enlisted personnel who viewed him as a mentor and role model. The Barrett M82 he selected from the armory was his personal favorite, a rifle he'd customized with competition-grade optics and modifications. That had cost him nearly 2 months' salary. Marcus, by contrast, appeared almost reluctant as he approached the firing line. His shooting kit was standard issue, borrowed from the armory, and he carried a simple notebook filled with his calculations. Several spectators exchanged knowing looks. The outcome seemed predetermined. "All right, gentlemen," announced Range Safety Officer Walsh, consulting her clipboard. "Standard long-range protocols apply. We'll start at 1,500 meters with man-sized silhouette targets. The best of 5 shots wins each distance. Sergeant Hawkins, as the challenger, Staff Sergeant Chin shoots first. The 1,500-meter targets were barely visible to the naked eye, appearing as dark rectangles against the desert backdrop. Through a spotting scope, they resolved into standard human silhouettes, but at that distance, atmospheric conditions could make them appear to dance and shimmer like mirages. Marcus approached the firing line and began setting up his position with methodical precision. Unlike Hawkins, who relied on muscle memory and instinct developed through thousands of rounds, Marcus consulted his notebook, checking wind readings against his calculations and adjusting his scope settings according to formulas rather than feel. Temperature 82 degrees, humidity 12%, wind from the southwest at 8 knots with gusts to 12. He muttered to himself, cross-referencing these values with tables he'd created the previous night. Elevation correction. Plus 4 minutes of angle, windage correction left 2.7 minutes. Hawkins rolled his eyes at the elaborate preparation. This isn't a science experiment, John. Just point and shoot. The first shot echoed across the desert, the massive .50 caliber round producing a distinctive crack that made several spectators instinctively step back. Through the spotting scope, Walsh called out the result. Hit, center mass, approximately 6 inches right of center. A murmur ran through the crowd. It was a respectable shot, better than many had expected from the demolitions expert, but still well within the realm of luck rather than skill. Marcus made a notation in his book, adjusting his calculations based on the actual bullet impact versus his predicted trajectory. His second shot struck 4 inches left of center, and his third shot was nearly dead center. By his fourth shot, he had compensated for all the variables his mathematical model had missed, and the bullet struck within 2 inches of the target's center. His fifth and final shot, at 1,500 meters, was perfect center mass. The crowd's murmur had shifted from skeptical amusement to surprised interest. 5 consecutive hits at 1,500 meters was impressive shooting by any standard, and the progression from good to excellent suggested skill rather than beginner's luck. Hawkins stepped to the firing line with his characteristic swagger intact, but Marcus noticed a subtle change in his demeanor. The casual dismissiveness had been replaced by focused concentration. Hawkins was no longer treating this as target practice against an amateur. The first shot from Hawkins' customized rifle was spectacular, dead center on the silhouette with authority that spoke of years of experience. His second and third shots were equally impressive, creating a tight group that would have been excellent at any distance. His fourth shot, however, drifted slightly right, and his fifth shot, fired, perhaps with a touch of too much confidence, struck the target's edge. 4 hits, 1 miss for Sergeant Hawkins, Walsh announced. Staff Sergeant Chun wins the 1,500-meter stage. The crowd's reaction was more subdued now, with veteran shooters beginning to reassess their initial impressions. Rodriguez nudged Miller and whispered, "Maybe Demo Boy actually knows what he's doing." Hawkins' jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but his voice remained steady. "Lucky round, Chen. Let's see how you do when the real shooting starts." "Next stage is 2,000 meters, Walsh announced. "Same rules apply." At 2,000 meters, the targets became theoretical concepts rather than visible objects. Even through high-powered scopes, they appeared as faint suggestions against the desert floor, requiring shooters to rely on experience, instinct, and an almost supernatural ability to read atmospheric conditions. Marcus spent nearly 10 minutes setting up for the 2,000-meter stage, consulting his notebook and making calculations that looked more like doctoral thesis work than shooting preparation. He measured wind speed at ground level, then estimated wind conditions at various altitudes through which his bullet would travel. He calculated the increased effect of the Coriolis force at the extended range, factored in the temperature differential between the shaded firing line and the sun-baked target area, and even considered the slight difference in elevation between his position and the target. Jesus Christ, Chun, Hawkins muttered. Are you going to shoot or write a book? Marcus ignored the comment and settled into his shooting position. His first shot at 2,000 meters missed the target entirely, striking the dirt several feet to the left, but instead of frustration, his face showed the satisfaction of a scientist gathering data. He made rapid calculations in his notebook, adjusting for the actual wind conditions he'd just measured through bullet impact. His second shot struck the target's left shoulder. His third shot hit center mass. His fourth shot was dead center. And his fifth shot struck within inches of the fourth. The crowd had grown silent. 4 hits out of 5 shots at 2,000 meters was exceptional shooting, the kind of performance that earned recognition in military shooting competitions. Several senior NCOs were now taking notes, and Master Sergeant Williams had moved closer to observe the action firsthand. Hawkins approached the firing line with grim determination. His reputation was now genuinely at stake, and everyone present understood the implications. His first shot was perfect, demonstrating the skill that had made him legendary. His second and third shots were equally impressive, creating a group that would have been remarkable at half the distance. But the desert wind had shifted slightly, a change so subtle that only the most experienced shooters might detect it. Hawkins, relying on the instincts that had served him faithfully for years, didn't adjust for the variation. His fourth shot missed the target by inches, and his fifth shot, fired with increasing tension, also missed. 3 hits, 2 misses for Sergeant Hawkins, Walsh announced. Staff Sergeant Sheen wins the 2,000-meter stage. The implications were becoming clear to everyone present. This wasn't a fluke or beginner's luck. Marcus Chun had just outshot the squadron's best marksman at a distance, where most soldiers couldn't even see the target clearly. Hawkins' confidence had evaporated, replaced by a mixture of disbelief and growing respect. Miller was openly staring at Marcus as if seeing him for the first time, and Rodriguez had pulled out his phone to record what was clearly becoming a historic moment. "Well," Hawkins said, his voice lacking its earlier bravado, "I guess we move to 2,500 meters. Master Sergeant Williams stepped forward. "Gentlemen, I think we've seen enough to know," Marcus interrupted quietly, surprising everyone including himself. "If we're doing this, let's do it right." Something had changed in Marcus during the competition. The quiet demolitions expert, who avoided confrontation, had discovered something unexpected in the precision of long-range shooting. Each successful shot had built his confidence, and more importantly, had validated his mathematical approach to what others considered an art form. 2,500 meters it is, Williams agreed, clearly fascinated by the unfolding drama. At 2,500 meters, the targets were invisible to the naked eye and challenging even through advanced optics. The bullets would be in flight for nearly 3 seconds, traveling through multiple layers of air with different temperatures, pressures, and wind conditions. It was a distance where physics became more important than marksmanship, where calculation mattered more than instinct. Marcus spent 15 minutes preparing for the 2,500-meter shots, his calculations becoming increasingly complex. He borrowed a rangefinder from Walsh to verify the exact distance, consulted a ballistics app on his phone to cross-check his manual calculations, and even called the meteorology office for updated atmospheric pressure readings. The crowd had grown larger, with personnel from other units joining the spectators. Someone had brought folding chairs, and the informal gathering was beginning to resemble a sporting event rather than a training exercise. When Marcus finally settled into his shooting position, the desert had grown completely quiet except for the whisper of wind across the sand. His first shot at 2,500 meters was a miss, but a close one, striking just inches from the target. His notebook came out immediately, and he spent several minutes recalculating based on the observed impact. His second shot was a hit, striking the target's lower torso. His third shot was center mass. His fourth shot was perfect center, and his fifth shot grouped within 2 inches of the fourth. The crowd erupted in spontaneous applause, something that had never happened at a military shooting competition. Even veteran snipers were shaking their heads in amazement, and several officers had appeared from nowhere to witness what was clearly an extraordinary display of marksmanship. Hawkins approached the firing line knowing that his reputation now hung in the balance. 3 misses out of 5 shots would be understandable at this distance, but it would also mean a decisive defeat by someone he had dismissed as an amateur just hours earlier. His first shot was excellent, striking center mass with the authority of a master marksman. His second shot was nearly as good, and for a moment it seemed as though his experience might triumph over Marcus's mathematical approach. But the desert wind was becoming increasingly variable as the morning sun heated the sand, creating thermal currents that were nearly impossible to predict through instinct alone. Hawkins' third shot missed by several inches. His fourth shot was another miss, and his fifth shot, fired with visible frustration, missed the target entirely. 2 hits, 3 misses for Sergeant Hawkins, Walsh announced. Staff Sergeant Chun wins the 2,500-meter stage. The silence that followed was profound. Marcus Chun, the quiet demolitions expert whom everyone had expected to fail spectacularly, had just defeated the squadron's best marksman at 3 consecutive distances, culminating in a performance at 2,500 meters that would have been impressive. For a professional sniper, Hawkins extended his hand, his expression a mixture of disbelief and genuine respect. "I don't know how you did that, Chun, but that was some of the best shooting I've ever seen." Marcus shook the offered hand, still somewhat stunned by his own performance. "Just math," he said quietly, but his voice carried a new note of confidence that hadn't been there that morning. Master Sergeant Williams stepped forward, his expression thoughtful. "Staff Sergeant Chun, I think we need to have a conversation about your future training opportunities. What you just accomplished doesn't happen by accident." As the crowd began to disperse, discussing what they'd witnessed in tones of amazement and speculation, Marcus packed his borrowed equipment and notebook. The bet was over, and he'd won decisively, but something more significant had happened. He'd discovered that his mathematical approach to complex problems could be applied to areas far beyond demolitions. The quiet demolitions expert from Sacramento had become something else entirely in the span of a single morning. He'd become a marksman whose precision was limited only by the mathematics of the possible. The mess hall that evening buzzed with an energy Marcus had never experienced. Word of the shooting competition had spread throughout Nellis Air Force Base with the speed of wildfire, and the story had grown with each retelling. By dinner time, Marcus found himself the reluctant center of attention from personnel across multiple units, all wanting to hear firsthand about the mathematical marksman who had dethroned Jake Hawkins. Marcus sat at his usual, isolated table. But solitude was no longer an option. Captain Sarah Mitchell from the Base Intelligence Unit approached with her meal tray, followed by Lieutenant Colonel James Parker, the squadron's executive officer, and several other officers Marcus recognized, but had never spoken to directly. "Staff Sergeant Chun," Captain Mitchell said, settling into the seat across from him, "I've been reviewing your personnel file. Bachelor's degree in Applied Physics from UC Davis, master's degree in engineering, graduated summa cum laude. Why exactly are you working on demolitions instead of advanced ballistics research?" Marcus looked up from his meal, uncomfortable with the sudden attention. "I like working with explosives. The calculations are straightforward and the results are predictable." "Apparently, you find long-range shooting equally predictable, Lieutenant," Colonel Parker observed, his tone carrying genuine curiosity rather than casual interest. "Master Sergeant Williams briefed me on this morning's performance. He used words like unprecedented and extraordinary." The truth was that Marcus himself was still processing what had happened. The shooting competition had revealed capabilities he hadn't known he possessed, But more importantly, it had demonstrated that his analytical approach to complex systems could be applied far beyond his current specialty. The mathematics that governed explosive yields and timer mechanisms were fundamentally similar to those that controlled bullet trajectories and atmospheric effects. "Sir, I just applied basic physics principles to the shooting problem," Marcus replied. "Ballistics is essentially applied mathematics, trajectory calculations, atmospheric corrections, Coriolis effects. Once you understand the variables, it becomes a matter of measurement and computation." Captain Mitchell exchanged glances with Lieutenant Colonel Parker. "Staff Sergeant, how would you feel about some additional training opportunities? The Army Marksmanship Unit has programs that might interest someone with your unique approach to precision shooting." Before Marcus could respond, the conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Hawkins, Rodriguez, and Miller. The dynamic between the group had shifted dramatically since morning. Where yesterday Hawkins had approached with casual dominance, tonight he carried himself with the careful respect of someone who had learned a hard lesson about assumptions. "Chun," Hawkins said, extending his hand again, "I owe you an apology. What I witnessed today wasn't luck or beginner's enthusiasm. That was world-class shooting, and I was an ass for doubting you." The apology was genuine, and Marcus found himself reassessing his opinion of the man who had seemed like nothing more than a bully just hours earlier. "You pushed me to perform better than I thought possible. I should be thanking you. Mind if we join you?" Rodriguez asked, gesturing to the empty seats around Marcus's table. "I've got questions about your shooting method, and frankly, I want to understand how you made those calculations work at extended range." As the group settled around the table, Marcus found himself explaining his mathematical approach to marksmanship for the first time to an audience that was genuinely interested, rather than skeptical. He pulled out his notebook and began walking them through the equations he'd developed, the atmospheric correction factors, and the systematic approach he'd used to account for variables that most shooters handled through intuition. "This is fascinating," Captain Mitchell observed, studying the calculations. "You've essentially created a mathematical model that can predict bullet trajectory with extraordinary precision. Have you considered the applications beyond recreational shooting?" The question hung in the air with implications that Marcus was only beginning to understand. Lieutenant Colonel Parker leaned forward, his expression thoughtful. "Staff Sergeant Chun, what I'm about to discuss with you is unofficial and preliminary, but your performance today has raised some interesting possibilities. The military is always looking for innovative approaches to long-range precision, and your mathematical methodology might have applications in areas we haven't fully explored." Marcus felt a familiar mixture of excitement and apprehension. The same feeling he'd experienced when first accepted into the explosives program. The sense that his life was about to change in ways he couldn't predict. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of unexpected opportunities and challenges. Word of Marcus's shooting ability had reached higher levels of command than he'd imagined possible, and his daily routine was disrupted by requests for demonstrations, interviews, and consultations with personnel from various specialized units. First significant change came when Master Sergeant Williams assigned him to temporary duty with the base's Advanced Marksmanship Program, a small unit that worked with experimental shooting techniques and equipment. The program director, Chief Warrant Officer Rebecca Torres, was a former Army sniper instructor whose reputation extended far beyond Nellis. "Chun," Torres said during their first meeting, "I've reviewed the footage from your competition with Hawkins, and I've never seen anything quite like your systematic approach to long-range shooting. I want to understand your methodology, and more importantly, I want to see how far we can push it." The Advanced Marksmanship Program occupied a series of specialized facilities that Marcus had never known existed on the base. The main laboratory contained equipment that looked more like a university physics department than a military shooting range, computers running ballistic simulation software, atmospheric monitoring devices, and precision measurement tools that could calculate environmental variables to extraordinary accuracy. This is where we test experimental shooting techniques and equipment, Torres explained, leading Marcus through the facility. We work with manufacturers to develop new optics, ammunition, and shooting systems. We also research extreme range shooting applications that most people consider impossible. She stopped at a computer workstation displaying a complex ballistics program. Our current challenge is a theoretical shooting problem that's been considered unsolvable. We call it the Extreme Range Initiative, successful target engagement at distances exceeding 4,000 meters under field conditions. Marcus studied the display, his mind automatically beginning to process the variables involved. At 4,000 meters, a bullet would be in flight for over 4 seconds, traveling through multiple atmospheric layers with different temperatures, pressures, and wind conditions. The Coriolis effect would be substantial, and even minor variations in ammunition or atmospheric conditions could result in misses measured in meters rather than inches. Has anyone achieved consistent hits at that distance? Marcus asked. There have been isolated successes under perfect conditions with extensive preparation, Torres replied, but nothing that could be replicated reliably in field situations. The variables become too complex for traditional shooting methods. Marcus spent the next several days studying the Extreme Range Initiative data, developing increasingly sophisticated mathematical models that accounted for every variable he could identify. The work was similar to his explosives calculations, but vastly more complex, requiring him to consider factors that changed continuously throughout the bullet's flight path. The breakthrough came during his second week in the program, when he realized that his static mathematical approach needed to become dynamic. Instead of calculating a single trajectory based on initial conditions, he developed a model that predicted how those conditions would change during the bullet's flight time, and adjusted the calculations accordingly. This is revolutionary, Torres sighed, reviewing Marcus's work. You're not just calculating where to aim based on current conditions. You're predicting what the conditions will be when the bullet reaches various points along its trajectory. The first test of Marcus's extreme range model came on a windless morning when atmospheric conditions were as close to ideal as the Nevada desert ever provided. The target was a standard silhouette placed at exactly 4,200 meters, a distance that pushed the boundaries of both equipment and human capability. Marcus spent over an hour preparing for the shot, taking measurements, consulting his calculations, and making minute adjustments to his scope settings. The mathematics involved filled several pages of his notebook, and the final aiming correction seemed almost arbitrary to observers who didn't understand the underlying theory. The shot, when it finally came, was anticlimactic in its execution, but profound in its implications. The massive .50 caliber round left the barrel with its characteristic crack, then seemed to disappear into the desert silence. For over 4 seconds, nothing happened, an eternity in shooting terms. Then Torres's voice crackled over the radio. From the observation post, target hit, center mass. Repeat, target hit center mass at 4,200 meters. The small group of observers erupted in amazement, but Marcus felt only the quiet satisfaction of a mathematical proof successfully demonstrated. The equations had worked exactly as predicted, accounting for every variable and delivering the kata bullet to its intended destination with precision that bordered on the supernatural. Word of the 4,200-meter shot spread through military channels, with even greater speed than the original competition with Hawkins. Within days, Marcus found himself briefing officers from Pentagon-level commands, explaining his methodology to scientists from various defense research organizations, and participating in classified discussions about applications he wasn't cleared to fully understand. The attention was overwhelming for someone who had spent his career avoiding the spotlight. But Marcus began to realize that his discovery was bigger than marksmanship. His mathematical approach to complex multivariable systems had applications that extended far beyond shooting. The same principles could be applied to artillery calculations, missile guidance systems, and any situation where precision was required despite constantly changing conditions. 3 weeks after the extreme range demonstration, Marcus received orders that would change his life permanently. He was being transferred to the Army Research Laboratory in Maryland, with a new military occupational specialty designation that had been created specifically for his unique skill set. Advanced Ballistic Systems Analyst. The transfer meant leaving behind the familiar world of demolitions and embracing a future that was uncertain but filled with possibilities he was only beginning to understand. As he packed his belongings and prepared to leave Nellis, Marcus reflected on the chain of events that had begun with a simple desire to help his sister with her ROTC marksmanship problems. On his final evening at the base, the 7th Squadron gathered for an informal farewell dinner. Hawkins stood to offer a toast, his earlier antagonism completely forgotten. "To Marcus Chun," he said, raising his glass, "who taught us that there's always more than one way to solve a problem, and that sometimes the quiet guy in the corner is the one you should be listening to." As the group raised their glasses, Marcus felt a strange mixture of pride and humility. He had discovered capabilities he never knew he possessed, but more importantly, he had learned that expertise in one area could open doors to possibilities he had never imagined. The mathematical principles that had made him an exceptional demolitions expert had transformed him into something entirely new, a precision specialist, whose skills were limited only by the complexity of the problems he chose to solve. The quiet physics student from Sacramento had become someone who could redefine what the military considered possible. But as exciting as his new assignment promised to be, Marcus knew that his greatest achievement wasn't the impossible shots or the mathematical breakthroughs. It was the discovery that his analytical approach to the world could make a difference in ways that extended far beyond academic theory. He had found his calling, and it was bigger than he had ever dared to imagine. The Army Research Laboratory in Maryland was a world apart from the desert simplicity of Nellis Air Force Base, located in Aberdeen Proving Ground. The facility housed some of the military's most advanced research projects, and Marcus found himself working alongside scientists and engineers whose credentials read like a directory of America's top universities. Dr. Elizabeth Hartwell, the lab's director of ballistics research, had personally requested Marcus's assignment after reviewing classified footage of his extreme-range demonstrations. "Staff Sergeant Chen," Dr. Hartwell said during their initial meeting, "your mathematical approach to long-range shooting has implications that extend far beyond individual marksmanship. We believe your methodology could revolutionize how we approach precision engagement systems across multiple platforms." The Advanced Ballistics Division occupied an entire building within the complex, featuring computer modeling systems that could simulate shooting conditions anywhere on Earth, environmental chambers that could replicate atmospheric conditions from Arctic tundra to tropical rainforest, and precision measurement equipment that could detect variations measured in thousandths of an inch. Marcus's first assignment was both exciting and daunting. Develop a computerized system that could calculate shooting solutions for any combination of weapon, ammunition, target distance, and environmental conditions. The project, classified under the designation Precision Fire Initiative, represented the military's attempt to democratize extreme-range shooting by making Marcus's mathematical approach available to any qualified marksman. Working with a team of software engineers and ballistics experts, Marcus spent months translating his notebook calculations into algorithms that could process thousands of variables in real time. The work required him to quantify intuitive knowledge he hadn't realized he possessed, breaking down his shooting methodology into discrete steps that could be programmed and replicated. "This is fascinating," said Dr. Jennifer Walsh, the project's lead software engineer. as she reviewed Marcus's latest algorithm. "You're essentially creating an artificial intelligence that can outthink atmospheric conditions. The computer doesn't just calculate trajectory, it predicts how environmental factors will change during bullet flight and adjusts accordingly." The first prototype of the precision fire system was tested on a classified range in Virginia, where Marcus worked with volunteer marksmen from various elite units. The results were extraordinary. Soldiers with minimal long-range experience were achieving hits at distances that had previously required years of specialized training. Sergeant First Class Michael Torres, a Special Forces sniper with 12 years of experience, was initially skeptical of the computer-assisted approach. "I've been shooting long-range for over a decade," he said. "I don't need a calculator to tell me where the wind is blowing." But after successfully engaging targets at 3,500 meters, using Marcus's system, a distance that had previously been beyond his capabilities, Torres became one of the program's strongest advocates. "This isn't about replacing experience and skill," he admitted. "It's about extending what's possible when you combine human expertise with mathematical precision." The success of the Precision Fire Initiative caught the attention of senior military leadership, and Marcus found himself briefing generals and defense contractors about applications that went far beyond individual shooting. His mathematical models were being adapted for artillery fire control systems, naval gunfire support, and even missile guidance technologies. 6 months after arriving at Aberdeen, Marcus received an unexpected visitor, his sister Emma, now a freshman at UC Davis, studying engineering. She had driven across the country during spring break to see her brother and understand how her simple request for marksmanship advice had led to such dramatic changes in his career. "I can't believe all this started because I was struggling with our OTC shooting," Emma said as Marcus gave her a tour of the lab facilities. "When you started explaining bullet trajectories over the phone, I never imagined you were developing something this revolutionary." Marcus smiled, remembering those first conversations about wind compensation and breathing techniques. "Neither did I, but that's the thing about mathematics. Once you start applying it systematically to a problem, you often discover solutions that weren't obvious before." They stopped at Marcus's workstation, where multiple monitors displayed complex ballistics calculations and environmental modeling software. Emma studied the equations, recognizing some of the physics principles from her own coursework. "This looks like doctoral-level research," she observed. "Are you planning to pursue advanced degrees in ballistics?" The question had been weighing on Marcus's mind for weeks. Dr. Hartwell had suggested that he consider enrolling in a graduate program, possibly pursuing a PhD in applied physics with a focus on ballistics research. Several universities had already expressed interest in his work, offering full scholarships and research positions. "I'm thinking about it," Marcus admitted. "But I also enjoy the practical application of what I'm doing here. There's something satisfying about solving real-world problems rather than just theoretical ones." Their conversation was interrupted by Dr. Hartwell, who approached with an expression of barely contained excitement. "Marcus, we just received approval for Phase 2 of the Precision Fire Initiative. The Pentagon wants to see a full-scale demonstration of your system's capabilities." The demonstration would take place at Yuma Proving Ground in Arizona, where military officials from multiple branches would observe trials of the computerized shooting system under various conditions. Success could lead to widespread adoption of Marcus's methodology, fundamentally changing how the military approached long-range precision engagement. But Dr. Hartwell had saved the most significant news for last. "They've also requested that you personally demonstrate the extreme limits of your mathematical approach. The challenge is to achieve a confirmed hit at 5,000 meters, a distance that would set a new world record for precision shooting. 5,000 meters was beyond the realm of traditional marksmanship, entering territory where success would depend entirely on mathematical precision and environmental prediction. At that distance, The bullet would be in flight for nearly 5 seconds, traveling through multiple atmospheric layers and covering a trajectory that would drop over 400 feet from muzzle to target. Marcus spent 3 weeks preparing for the demonstration, refining his calculations and developing new algorithms specifically for extreme-range shooting. He worked with weapons specialists to select the optimal rifle and ammunition combination, consulting with meteorologists to understand atmospheric modeling at unprecedented levels of detail. The day of the demonstration arrived with perfect weather conditions, clear skies, minimal wind, and stable atmospheric pressure. Representatives from the Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marines were present, along with defense contractors and research scientists from various institutions. Marcus approached the firing line with equipment that represented the culmination of his mathematical journey: a custom-built rifle chambered in .408 CHATAC, precision ammunition manufactured to extraordinary tolerances, and a tablet computer running his latest ballistics software. The 5,000-meter target was invisible to the naked eye and barely detectable even through high-powered optics. Success would require not just mathematical precision, but absolute confidence in calculations that pushed the boundaries of what physics made possible. Marcus spent 45 minutes preparing for the shot, taking environmental measurements, consulting his software, and making adjustments that seemed almost mystical to observers who didn't understand the underlying mathematics. The final shooting solution required corrections that compensated for the Earth's rotation, temperature variations at different altitudes, and wind conditions that would change during the bullet's extended flight time. When Marcus finally settled into his shooting position, the proving ground fell silent except for the whisper of desert wind. The shot, when it came, seemed to disappear into the vastness of the Arizona landscape, leaving only the echo of the rifle's report and the profound silence of waiting. 5 seconds felt like an eternity. Then the radio crackled with the voice of the observer at the target area. Hit confirmed. Direct impact, center mass, at 5,000 meters. New world record. The gathered officials erupted in amazement, but Marcus felt only the quiet satisfaction of a mathematical proof successfully demonstrated. The equations had worked perfectly, delivering the bullet across an impossible distance with precision that redefined what human beings could achieve when mathematics and marksmanship converged. General Patricia Williams, the Army's Deputy Chief of Staff for Operations, approached Marcus as he secured his equipment. "Staff Sergeant Chen, what you've accomplished here goes beyond shooting. You've demonstrated that systematic analysis can overcome limitations that we previously considered absolute." The 5,000-meter shot became the capstone of Marcus's military career, but it also marked the beginning of something even more significant. Universities competed to offer him research positions. Defense contractors sought his consultation on precision systems, and the military fast-tracked his promotion to warrant officer, recognizing his unique expertise with a career path designed specifically for his skills. 2 years later, Chief Warrant Officer Marcus Chun stood before a classroom of graduate students at MIT, where he taught advanced ballistics as part of the university's partnership with the Department of Defense. His mathematical approach to long-range shooting had evolved into a comprehensive methodology for solving complex precision problems across multiple disciplines. The shy demolitions expert from Sacramento had become something unprecedented, a soldier scientist whose work bridged the gap between theoretical mathematics and practical application. His students included future military officers, aerospace engineers, and research scientists who would carry his methodologies into fields he was only beginning to imagine. On the wall of his office hung 2 items that reminded him of his journey. His original notebook from the shooting competition with Hawkins, filled with the crude calculations that had started everything, and a photograph from the 5,000-meter demonstration, showing him at the moment of impossible precision. But the item he treasured most was a simple letter from Emma, now pursuing her own graduate degree in engineering, thanking him for showing her that expertise in one area could open doors to possibilities that seemed impossible until someone proved otherwise. Marcus had learned that the most significant discoveries often began with the simplest questions. What if mathematical precision could be applied where others relied on intuition? What if systematic analysis could overcome limitations that tradition considered absolute? What if the quiet guy in the corner, armed with nothing but curiosity and calculation, could redefine what the world considered possible? The impossible. Shot had become possible through mathematics, but more importantly, it had demonstrated that the boundaries of human achievement were often limited only by the imagination to approach old problems with new methods. Marcus Chun had proved that sometimes the most revolutionary breakthroughs came not from advanced technology or extraordinary talent, but from the simple application of rigorous thinking to challenges that others had accepted as unsolvable. In the end, his greatest achievement wasn't the records he set or the systems he developed. It was the proof that an analytical mind, applied with patience and precision, could transform not just individual capability but entire fields of human endeavor. The demolitions expert who calculated explosive yields had become the marksman who calculated the impossible, and in doing so, had shown that the limits of what humans could achieve were far more flexible than anyone had imagined. 5 years after the 5,000-meter demonstration, Marcus Chun received a phone call that would test everything he had learned about precision under pressure. The voice on the secure line belonged to Colonel Janet Pierce, commander of the Joint Special Operations Command's Crisis Response Division. "Chief Chun, we have a situation that requires your unique expertise. How quickly can you get to Germany?" Within 18 hours, Marcus found himself on a military transport aircraft bound for Ramstein Air Base, carrying specialized equipment and software that existed nowhere else in the world. The mission briefing, delivered during the flight, revealed a scenario that pushed beyond theoretical demonstrations into life-and-death reality. Terrorist cell had seized control of a chemical processing facility outside Frankfurt, taking 43 hostages, including a group of visiting schoolchildren. The facility's location presented an impossible tactical challenge. It sat in a valley surrounded by hills, with the only viable shooting positions located at extreme ranges that conventional sniper teams couldn't reliably engage. The closest we can position a sniper team is 3,800 meters, Colonel Pierce explained via video conference from the command center. At that distance, even our best marksmen are operating beyond reliable engagement range. But intelligence suggests the terrorists are planning to detonate chemical containers within hours. Marcus studied the tactical maps and satellite imagery on his tablet, his mind automatically calculating the variables involved. The facility was surrounded by industrial buildings that created complex wind patterns, and the spring weather promised changing atmospheric conditions throughout the day. "What's the specific target profile?" Marcus asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "Single high-value target," confirmed terrorist leader directing the operation. "Intelligence indicates neutralizing him will likely cause the others to surrender. But we need absolute certainty of success. There won't be a second chance." The aircraft landed at Ramstein just after dawn, where Marcus was met by a joint task force that included American Special Operations personnel, German counterterrorism units, and intelligence specialists from multiple agencies. The operation's complexity went far beyond a single shot. It required coordinating precision engagement with simultaneous rescue efforts in a scenario where failure meant dozens of civilian casualties. Marcus was transported directly to the primary shooting position, a concealed location on a hillside that offered clear lines of sight to the chemical facility. The distance measurement confirmed the challenge: 3,847 meters under conditions that included variable winds, temperature inversions from the industrial valley, and atmospheric pressure changes predicted throughout the day. Setting up his equipment. Marcus realized this was fundamentally different from any demonstration or training exercise he had experienced. The 5,000-meter world record shot had been fired under ideal conditions with unlimited preparation time. This mission required precision under tactical constraints, with environmental factors that would continue changing until the moment of engagement. "Chief Chun," said Master Sergeant Rick Sullivan, the team's senior sniper who would serve as Marcus's spotter, "I've been shooting long range for 15 years, and I've never seen anything like these conditions. The valley creates thermal currents that change every few minutes, and we're dealing with crosswinds that are completely unpredictable." Marcus spent 2 hours developing a modified version of his mathematical model, one that could account for rapidly changing environmental conditions rather than static atmospheric data. The challenge was creating calculations that remained valid during the extended observation period required for tactical operations. Using portable meteorological equipment, Marcus established monitoring stations at different elevations around the valley, creating a three-dimensional map of atmospheric conditions that updated in real time. The data revealed wind patterns that shifted based on industrial heat sources, temperature gradients that varied with solar heating, and pressure variations caused by the valley's topography. "This is incredible," observed Dr. Sarah Kim, a ballistics specialist who had flown in from Aberdeen to support the operation. "You're essentially predicting atmospheric behavior in real time and adjusting your shooting solution continuously." The terrorist leader appeared intermittently throughout the morning, but always under conditions that made engagement inadvisable. Marcus tracked each appearance, refining his environmental model and updating his calculations based on observed atmospheric changes. By noon, he had developed what amounted to a dynamic shooting solution that could adapt to changing conditions within seconds. The critical moment came at 1347. Hours when intelligence reported that the terrorist leader was preparing to initiate the chemical release. Marcus had a window of opportunity, but the atmospheric conditions were among the most challenging he had ever encountered. Gusting crosswinds, temperature inversions from industrial heating, and variable humidity from nearby cooling towers. "Target acquired," Sullivan reported through his spotting scope. "Clear shot opportunity, but conditions are marginal." Marcus consulted his tablet, where real-time atmospheric data fed into algorithms that calculated shooting solutions faster than any human could process manually. The mathematics indicated success was possible, but with margins that left no room for error. "Wind call?" Marcus asked, settling into his shooting, positioned with a precision rifle system that represented the pinnacle of military marksmanship technology. "Variable crosswind, 8 to 15 knots from the southwest, with gusts showing thermal influence from the industrial complex. Temperature differential between firing position and target area showing continuous change." Marcus made final adjustments to his scope settings, compensating for conditions that were changing even as he prepared to shoot. The mathematical model indicated a shooting solution that seemed almost impossible, accounting for wind variations at multiple altitudes, temperature effects that would vary during the bullet's flight path, and atmospheric pressure changes occurring in real time. "Solution confirmed," Marcus announced, engaging target. The shot felt different from any he had ever fired. Not because of the equipment or the distance, but because 43 lives depended on mathematical precision applied under the most challenging conditions imaginable. The .408 Chaytek round left the barrel with authority, beginning a journey that would take over 4 seconds across a distance that pushed the boundaries of human capability. Marcus remained in his shooting position, watching through his scope. As the bullet traveled through multiple atmospheric layers, each with different wind speeds and temperatures. The mathematics had predicted the trajectory, but confirmation would only come when the bullet reached its destination. "Hit confirmed," Sullivan reported, his voice carrying relief and amazement. "Target down, clean engagement." The radio immediately erupted with reports from the tactical teams moving in to secure the facility. Within minutes, the remaining terrorists had surrendered, and the hostages were being evacuated safely. The single precision shot had achieved what conventional assault tactics couldn't accomplish without significant casualties. As Marcus secured his equipment, Colonel Pierce approached with an expression that mixed professional gratitude with genuine awe. "Chief Chun, what you accomplished today wasn't just exceptional marksmanship. You solved a tactical problem that our planning teams considered unsolvable. The mission's success led to immediate recognition within military circles, but more importantly, it demonstrated that Marcus's mathematical approach could be applied to real-world scenarios where precision meant the difference between success and tragedy." The theoretical had become practical in the most profound way possible. Returning to MAT the following week, Marcus found himself reflecting on how his journey had evolved from helping his sister with ROTC marksmanship to conducting precision engagement operations that saved lives. His students, many of whom were already developing their own applications of his methodologies, sensed that something significant had occurred. "Professor Chun," asked Lieutenant Sarah Martinez, a graduate student studying advanced ballistics, "your lecture today seemed different. More focused on real-world applications than theoretical models." Marcus smiled, remembering his own transformation from theoretical understanding to practical application. Sometimes the most important thing mathematics can teach us is that precision isn't just about hitting targets. It's about understanding that when people's lives depend on your calculations, theory becomes responsibility. The classified nature of the German operation meant that Marcus couldn't share specific details, but the experience had reinforced his belief that mathematical precision could solve problems that seemed impossible through conventional approaches. More importantly, it had shown him that his greatest contribution wasn't just advancing the science of ballistics, but demonstrating that analytical thinking could save lives when applied with skill and responsibility. The quiet demolitions expert who had once avoided confrontation had become someone who could deliver precision under the most extreme pressure imaginable. But perhaps most remarkably, he had discovered that the mathematics he loved could be applied not just to hitting targets, but to protecting the innocent and serving something greater than theoretical knowledge. The congressional hearing room was packed with military officials, defense contractors, and technology journalists who had gathered to witness something unprecedented. A soldier being asked to explain how mathematics could potentially reshape modern warfare. Marcus sat at the witness table, uncomfortable in his dress uniform, facing a panel of senators who would determine the future funding and development of his precision engagement systems. Senator Rebecca Morrison, chairwoman of the Armed Services Committee, opened the session with a statement that surprised everyone present. "Chief Warrant Officer Chun, in 30 years of overseeing military technology development, I've never encountered a single individual whose work has generated such unanimous support from every branch of our armed forces. Today, we want to understand not just what you've accomplished, but how we can ensure American forces maintain this technological advantage." The hearing had been prompted by intelligence reports indicating that foreign military powers were attempting to reverse engineer Marcus's mathematical shooting methodologies. Chinese and Russian researchers had analyzed publicly available footage from his demonstrations, and early reports suggested they were developing their own versions of computerized precision systems. "The concern," explained General Patricia Williams, "is that we may have inadvertently revealed capabilities that adversaries could potentially match or exceed. We need to understand the full scope of Chief Chun's methodology and determine how to protect our technological advantages." Marcus had spent weeks preparing for this moment, working with Pentagon officials to develop explanations that conveyed the significance of his work without revealing classified technical details. The challenge was demonstrating that his approach represented more than just advanced shooting techniques. It was a fundamental shift in how precision could be achieved across multiple military applications. "Senators," Marcus began, "my mathematical approach to long-range engagement isn't just about shooting. The algorithms we've developed can be applied to artillery fire control, naval gunfire support, missile guidance systems, and even automated defense platforms. We're talking about precision capabilities that could revolutionize how America projects military power. The implications were staggering. Marcus's team at MIT had already demonstrated that his environmental prediction algorithms could improve artillery accuracy by over 300% at extended ranges. Naval trials had shown similar improvements in shipboard fire control systems, and aerospace contractors were adapting his methodologies for precision-guided munitions. Senator James Crawford, a former Air Force pilot, leaned forward with obvious interest. "Chief Chen, help us understand the practical applications. How would this technology change actual military operations?" Marcus pulled up a classified presentation on the room's secure display system. "Consider a scenario where our forces need to provide precision fire support in an urban environment. Traditional methods require extensive preparation time and often result in collateral damage due to atmospheric variables that can't be accurately predicted." The presentation showed comparative analysis from recent training exercises. Conventional artillery units achieved 40% accuracy rates at maximum effective range under challenging conditions. Units equipped with Marcus's precision systems achieved 94% accuracy under identical conditions, with engagement times reduced from hours to minutes. "This is remarkable," observed Senator Lisa Park, a member of the Intelligence Committee. "But I'm concerned about the security implications. If this technology fell into the wrong hands, couldn't it be used against American forces?" The question addressed the Pentagon's primary concern about Marcus's work. His mathematical models were based on fundamental physics principles that couldn't be classified, but the specific algorithms and software implementations contained technical details that represented genuine strategic advantages. "That's exactly why we're here," General Williams explained. "Chief Chen's methodologies are already being incorporated into next-generation military systems, but we need to ensure proper security protocols while maintaining our technological edge." Marcus had anticipated this discussion and had spent months developing what he called compartmentalized precision systems that provided enhanced accuracy without revealing the underlying mathematical principles. The approach allowed American forces to benefit from his innovations while protecting the technical details that made them possible. "We can implement these capabilities through secure hardware and encrypted software that provides precision advantages without exposing our methods," Marcus explained. "Think of it as giving our forces a precision multiplier while keeping the mathematics classified." The hearing continued for 3 hours, covering applications that ranged from individual marksmanship to strategic weapons systems. Marcus found himself explaining concepts that bridged pure mathematics and practical military necessity, demonstrating how his academic background could solve real-world problems that traditional military thinking couldn't address. The breakthrough moment came when Senator Morrison asked a question that would reshape American military doctrine. "Chief Chen, if we fully implemented your precision systems across all our military branches, how would that change our strategic capabilities?" Marcus paused, considering the implications of his answer. "Senator, we would achieve precision capabilities that would make many traditional military approaches obsolete. When you can deliver exact effects at extreme ranges with mathematical certainty, you fundamentally change how conflicts are fought." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Marcus wasn't just describing improved shooting techniques, he was outlining a transformation in military capability that could shift global power balances. 3 months after the Fembridge shooting techniques, he was outlining a transformation in military capability that could shift global power balances. 3 months after the Faber's congressional hearing, Marcus received orders that would define the remainder of his career: establishment of the Joint Precision Systems Command, a new military organization dedicated to developing and implementing mathematical approaches to precision engagement across all service branches. The command facility, constructed at Fort Beaver in Virginia, represented the military's commitment to revolutionary precision capabilities. Marcus found himself wearing the rank of Major, a battlefield promotion that recognized his unique contributions, and commanding a team of over 200 scientists, engineers, and military specialists. "Major Chun," said Dr. Amanda Foster, the command's civilian research director, "we're essentially building the future of American military precision from the ground up. The responsibility is enormous, but so is the opportunity." The Joint Precision Systems Command operated with a budget that exceeded many major defense contractors, reflecting the Pentagon's understanding that Marcus's work represented a generational leap in military capability. Projects ranged from individual soldier systems to strategic weapons platforms, all unified by mathematical approaches to precision that had never been attempted at this scale. Marcus's first major initiative was the Integrated Precision Network, a system that would connect every American precision weapons platform to a central mathematical modeling system. Artillery units in Afghanistan could access the same environmental prediction algorithms that guided naval gunfire in the Pacific, creating unprecedented coordination and accuracy across global military operations. The personal cost of success, however, was significant. Marcus found himself traveling constantly between research facilities, training centers, and operational commands. His relationship with his family, particularly his sister Emma, who was now pursuing her own doctorate in engineering, suffered from the demands of his expanding responsibilities. "Marcus," Emma said during one of their rare phone conversations, "I'm proud of what you've accomplished, but I worry that you're losing yourself in all this. Remember when your biggest concern was helping me with ROTC marksmanship?" The comment struck deeper than Emma probably intended. Marcus realized that his journey from quiet demolitions expert to military innovator had been so rapid and consuming that he hadn't taken time to consider who he was becoming. The mathematical precision that had made him exceptional was beginning to define him in ways that extended far beyond his professional capabilities. That evening, Marcus stood alone in his laboratory, surrounded by computer systems running calculations that could predict environmental conditions anywhere on Earth. The technology was extraordinary, but he found himself missing the simplicity of his early experiments with basic ballistics equations. Security alert interrupted his reflection. Intelligence reports indicated that foreign military researchers had achieved breakthrough progress in developing their own precision systems. The technological race that Marcus had inadvertently started was accelerating, with implications that would reshape global military balance for decades to come. As he reviewed the classified intelligence, Marcus understood that his mathematical curiosity had unleashed consequences far beyond anything he could have imagined when he first accepted Jake Hawkins' shooting challenge. The quiet physics student who had wanted to help his sister had become the architect of military capabilities that would define America's strategic position in an increasingly complex world. The impossible shot had become possible through mathematics. But Marcus was beginning to realize that the most challenging calculations were yet to come. 10 years after the shooting competition that changed everything, Colonel Marcus Chun stood before the largest gathering of international military scientists in history. The Global Defense Innovation Summit in Geneva had drawn representatives from 43 nations, all seeking to understand how mathematical precision could be applied to modern conflict resolution. But Marcus wasn't there to discuss weapons technology. He was presenting something far more revolutionary. "Ladies and gentlemen," Marcus began, addressing the assembly in 3 languages he had learned during his decade of international collaboration. "Today I want to share how the same mathematical principles that revolutionize precision engagement can be applied to prevent conflicts before they begin." The presentation that followed would fundamentally alter how the world approached military science. Marcus had spent the previous 5 years developing what he called precision peace, mathematical models that could predict conflict escalation with the same accuracy his ballistics algorithms predicted bullet trajectories. The journey to this moment had been neither linear nor simple. After establishing the Joint Precision Systems Command, Marcus had watched his innovations spread throughout global military establishments. What began as a personal challenge to help his sister with marksmanship had evolved into an international arms race, with nations competing to develop increasingly sophisticated precision systems. The turning point came during a classified briefing 3 years earlier, when Marcus learned that his mathematical approaches were being used to develop autonomous weapons systems capable of engaging targets without human oversight. The same algorithms that had made him a master marksman were being adapted to create machines that could kill with mathematical certainty. Dr. Chen, the Pentagon Brasher, had said, using Marcus's newly earned doctorate designation, "Intelligence indicates that several nations are developing fully automated precision systems based on your methodologies. These platforms could theoretically engage targets at extreme ranges without any human intervention." The revelation had shattered Marcus's assumptions about how his work would be applied. He had envisioned enhancing human capability, not replacing human judgment with algorithmic decision-making. The mathematical precision he had developed to save lives was being transformed into systems that could take lives without conscience or consideration. That night, Marcus had called Emma, now Dr. Emma Chun, a respected professor of ethical engineering at Stanford. Their conversation lasted until dawn, exploring questions that neither had anticipated when Marcus first started calculating wind corrections for ROTC practice. "Marcus," Emma had said, "you've created something that transcends individual innovation. Your mathematical approach has become a paradigm that's reshaping how humans interact with precision and decision-making. But paradigms carry responsibilities that extend far beyond their original intentions." Emma's words had triggered a fundamental reassessment of Marcus's career trajectory. He began consulting with ethicists, philosophers, and peace researchers, exploring how mathematical precision could be applied to conflict prevention rather than conflict prosecution. The work led him to develop predictive models that could identify potential flashpoints before they escalated into violence. The Precision Peace Initiative represented a complete reversal of Marcus's military focus. Instead of calculating how to deliver kinetic effects with maximum accuracy, he was calculating how to deliver diplomatic interventions with maximum effectiveness. The same environmental modeling that predicted atmospheric conditions for long-range shooting was adapted to predict social and political conditions that led to international conflicts. "Consider the mathematical complexity of modern conflict," Marcus explained to the Geneva Assembly, displaying charts that showed conflict escalation patterns across multiple variables. Traditional diplomatic approaches rely on intuition and experience, much like traditional marksmanship relies on feel and instinct. But mathematical modeling can identify intervention points that prevent conflicts with the same precision we once applied to engaging targets. The demonstration that followed was unprecedented in diplomatic history. Marcus's team had identified a brewing territorial dispute between two African nations, complete with mathematical predictions about when diplomatic tensions would escalate into military action. Using precision peace algorithms, they had calculated optimal timing and messaging for international intervention. The results spoke for themselves. A conflict that traditional intelligence agencies predicted would begin within weeks had been diffused through precisely timed diplomatic interventions, delivered exactly when mathematical models indicated maximum effectiveness. The same analytical approach that had made Marcus the world's most precise marksman had prevented a war. "This is extraordinary," observed Dr. Ingrid Larsson, Sweden's Minister of Defense. "You're essentially applying ballistics mathematics to Human behavior prediction. The implications for international peacekeeping are revolutionary. But Marcus had learned that revolutionary capabilities carried responsibilities that extended far beyond their immediate applications. His presentation included detailed ethical frameworks for applying mathematical precision to human conflict, recognizing that the power to predict and influence human behavior required safeguards that didn't exist for traditional weapons systems. Mathematical precision in conflict resolution must be guided by human wisdom, Marcus emphasized. Algorithms can calculate optimal intervention strategies, but humans must decide whether those interventions serve justice, peace, and human dignity. The speech concluded with Marcus announcing his retirement from active military service and his acceptance of a new position, director of the International Institute for Mathematical Peace Studies, a research organization dedicated to applying precision analytics to global conflict prevention. The decision had been difficult but inevitable. Marcus realized that his greatest contribution wouldn't be perfecting weapons systems, but demonstrating how analytical thinking could serve humanity's highest aspirations rather than its most destructive capabilities. As the Geneva summit concluded, Marcus found himself surrounded by researchers, diplomats, and military officials who wanted to understand how a marksmanship competition had evolved into a peace initiative. The questions were variations on a theme. How had mathematical precision become a tool for preventing violence rather than enabling it? The answer, Marcus had learned, lay in understanding that precision was morally neutral. Its value depended entirely on how it was applied. The same mathematical rigor that could deliver a bullet to a target at impossible distances could deliver diplomatic solutions to conflicts that seemed equally impossible to resolve. 6 months later, Marcus stood in a very different setting. A small classroom at the University of Vermont, where he taught a course called Applied Mathematics for Human Flourishing. His students included future diplomats, social workers, environmental scientists, and engineers who wanted to understand how analytical thinking could address humanity's most complex challenges. Professor Chun asked Sarah Kim, a graduate student, studying conflict resolution, how do we know when mathematical models are helping human decisions versus replacing human judgment? The question reflected the central challenge of Marcus's new career. Having seen how his ballistics innovations had been transformed into autonomous weapons systems, he was determined to ensure that precision peace remained a tool that enhanced human wisdom rather than supplanting it. Mathematics should illuminate human choices, not make them, Marcus replied. When we use analytical tools to understand complex situations, we expand our capacity for wise decision-making. But the moment we let algorithms decide what humans should do, we've surrendered the judgment that makes us human. The classroom discussion that followed explored applications that ranged from predicting environmental disasters to optimizing humanitarian aid distribution. Marcus's students were developing mathematical approaches to problems he had never imagined, using ballistics-inspired trajectory modeling to predict refugee movement patterns, applying atmospheric prediction algorithms to forecast social media influence campaigns, and adapting his environmental sensors to monitor economic conditions that preceded political instability. Emma visited frequently, often serving as a guest lecturer who helped students understand the ethical implications of mathematical precision. Their conversations had evolved from wind correction techniques to philosophical discussions about technology's role in human society. You've come full circle, Emma observed during one visit, from using mathematics to hit targets to using mathematics to help humanity hit its highest aspirations. The impossible shot had become possible through mathematics, but Marcus had learned that the most important targets were often intangible: justice, peace, human dignity, and the aspiration to use precision in service of humanity's best impulses, rather than its most destructive capabilities. Standing on the range where it all began, Marcus understood that his greatest achievement wasn't the records he had set or the systems he had developed, It was the demonstration that analytical thinking, guided by human wisdom and ethical consideration, could transform not just individual capability, but entire approaches to humanity's most complex challenges. The quiet demolitions expert from Sacramento had become something unprecedented, a mathematical marksman who had learned to aim for peace. And in doing so, he had proved that the most precise shot of all was the one that chose not to fire, but to calculate a better way forward for everyone. Years passed, and Marcus's influence extended into realms he never could have predicted. International Institute for Mathematical Peace Studies became a nexus for researchers worldwide who were discovering that precision mathematics could address challenges far beyond military applications. Dr. Yuki Tanaka from Tokyo was using Marcus's atmospheric modeling techniques to predict and prevent industrial accidents. Professor Ahmed Hassan from Cairo had adapted the trajectory prediction algorithms to optimize disaster relief supply chains in regions affected by earthquakes and floods. The Institute's most ambitious project emerged when Marcus partnered with climate scientists to develop what they called environmental precision forecasting. The same mathematical principles that had once predicted wind patterns for long-range shooting were now predicting climate change effects with unprecedented accuracy, allowing governments to implement preventive measures decades before traditional climate models indicated action was necessary. "Marcus," said Dr. Lisa Rodriguez, the Institute's climate modeling director, "your ballistics equations are helping us calculate exactly when coastal cities need to begin infrastructure modifications to prevent flooding. We're essentially shooting at targets that are decades in the future." The climate work attracted attention from unexpected sources. Technology companies began consulting with Marcus about applying precision mathematics to artificial intelligence systems, seeking to understand how human judgment could guide algorithmic decision-making without being replaced by it. The conversations often returned to the fundamental question that had shaped Marcus's transition from military service. How could mathematical precision serve human wisdom rather than supplant it? Marcus found himself advising Silicon Valley executives, government policymakers, and academic researchers who were grappling with the ethical implications of increasingly powerful analytical tools. His experiences with autonomous weapons development had given him unique insights into the dangers of removing human oversight from precision systems. "The seductive thing about mathematical precision," Marcus explained during a TED Talk that would be viewed by millions, "is that it can make us feel like we've eliminated uncertainty. But uncertainty isn't always the enemy. Sometimes it's what forces us to remain humble, to keep questioning our assumptions, and to remember that human judgment involves values that can't be calculated." The TED Talk sparked international discussions about the relationship between mathematical precision and human wisdom. Universities began offering courses that combined Marcus's analytical methodologies with philosophy, ethics, and humanistic studies. Students learned to apply rigorous mathematical thinking while maintaining awareness of the moral dimensions of their work. One of Marcus's most unexpected collaborations began when Dr. Maria Santos, a neuroscientist from Brazil, approached him with a radical proposal. She had been studying the brain mechanisms involved in expert performance and wanted to understand how Marcus's mathematical approach to marksmanship had actually changed his neural processing. "What we're discovering," Dr. Santos explained, "is that your methodical approach to precision has created neural pathways that allow you to process complex multivariable problems more efficiently than people who rely purely on intuition. But more importantly, your ethical framework has strengthened the brain regions responsible for moral reasoning." The neuroscience research revealed that Marcus's decade-long journey from intuitive demolition work to mathematical marksmanship to ethical peace research had literally rewired his brain. The same analytical rigor that had made him an exceptional marksman had enhanced his capacity for moral reasoning and ethical decision-making. The findings had profound implications for education and human development. If mathematical precision could be taught in ways that strengthened rather than weakened moral reasoning, it suggested new approaches to preparing students for an increasingly complex world. Marcus began working with educational researchers to develop curricula that combined analytical thinking with ethical reasoning. The pilot programs, implemented in schools across 12 countries, showed remarkable results. Students who learned mathematics through ethical frameworks didn't just become better problem solvers, they became more thoughtful citizens who understood their responsibilities to use analytical tools wisely. The educational work brought Marcus full circle to his original motivation, helping others develop precision capabilities. But instead of teaching his sister basic marksmanship techniques, he was now helping entire generations learn how to apply mathematical thinking in service of human flourishing. Emma, now in her 40s and recognized as one of the world's leading experts in ethical engineering, often joined Marcus at international conferences where they presented joint research on technology development guided by moral considerations. Their sibling relationship had evolved into a professional partnership that influenced how institutions worldwide approach the development of powerful analytical tools. "We've learned something important," Emma said during their presentation at the World Economic Forum. "Precision without purpose can be dangerous, but precision guided by clear ethical principles can solve problems that seem impossible through conventional approaches." Their work together had attracted the attention of the United Nations, which invited Marcus to lead a new initiative, the Global Commission on Precision Ethics. The Commission's mandate was to develop international standards for applying mathematical precision to human challenges while maintaining appropriate safeguards against the misuse of analytical power. The Commission's first major project addressed the growing use of predictive algorithms in criminal justice systems. Marcus's team discovered that many jurisdictions were using mathematical models to predict criminal behavior without understanding the ethical implications of those predictions. The same precision that could be liberating when applied to ballistics was becoming oppressive when applied to human behavior without appropriate oversight. Working with legal scholars, social scientists, and human rights advocates, Marcus developed frameworks that allowed predictive systems to inform human decision-making without replacing human judgment. The work required the same attention to variables and precision that had characterized his marksmanship, but now the stakes involved fundamental questions of justice and human dignity. The Commission's recommendations were adopted by 47 countries, establishing international standards for ethical precision that influenced everything from medical diagnostics to educational assessment. Marcus had become an unlikely global authority on the responsible application of mathematical power. As his 60th birthday approached, Marcus reflected on the extraordinary journey that had begun with a simple desire to help Emma with her ROTC shooting problems. The mathematical curiosity that had driven him to accept Jake Hawkins' challenge had evolved into a life's work that touched millions of people worldwide. The recognition was significant, but unexpected. Marcus received honorary doctorates from universities on every continent, awards from peace organizations, and acknowledgement from scientific societies that recognized his unique contribution to applied mathematics. But the recognition that mattered most came from former students who were applying precision mathematics to challenges he had never imagined. Dr. James Washington, one of Marcus's first students at Vermont, had used atmospheric prediction algorithms to optimize urban planning in cities affected by climate change. Dr. Priya Patel from Mumbai had adapted trajectory calculations to improve surgical robotics for operations in remote areas. Dr. Carlos Mendez from Mexico City was using environmental modeling techniques to predict and prevent agricultural disasters. Each success story reinforced Marcus's conviction that mathematical precision, guided by human wisdom and ethical consideration, could address challenges that conventional approaches couldn't solve. The quiet demolitions expert who had once calculated explosive yields was now part of a global network of researchers who were calculating solutions to humanity's most complex problems. The story came full circle during Marcus's final visit to Nellis Air Force Base, where he had been invited to address the current members of the 7th Special Operations Squadron. Standing on the same range where he had first demonstrated mathematical marksmanship, Marcus looked out at faces that reminded him of his younger self, skilled professionals who were beginning to understand that their capabilities could be applied in ways they had never imagined. The shot that started everything wasn't remarkable because of the distance or the difficulty, Marcus told the assembled airmen. It was remarkable because it opened our minds to possibilities that we hadn't considered before. Every one of you has capabilities that could be applied to challenges far beyond your current mission. The question isn't whether you can hit difficult targets. The question is whether you can imagine targets worth hitting. After the presentation, a young staff sergeant approached Marcus with a question that might have seemed familiar. "Sir, I've been working on some calculations for improving explosive ordnance disposal techniques. Do you think mathematical modeling could make the work safer and more precise?" Marcus smiled, recognizing the curiosity and analytical thinking that had characterized his own journey. "Staff Sergeant, I think you're asking exactly the right questions. Mathematical precision can improve almost anything, but the most important precision involves choosing purposes that serve others." As Marcus prepared to leave Nellis for the final time, he understood that his greatest achievement wasn't any individual shot or scientific breakthrough. It was the demonstration that analytical thinking, guided by ethical consideration and applied with precision, could transform not just individual capability, but entire approaches to human flourishing. The impossible shot had become possible through mathematics, but Marcus had learned that the most important trajectory was the one that carried human wisdom forward, precisely aimed at a future where analytical power served humanity's highest aspirations rather than its most destructive impulses. Standing where it all began, Marcus Chun, the quiet physics student who had become a mathematical marksman, a precision researcher, and finally a teacher of ethical precision, understood that every shot fired in service of human flourishing was a shot that hit its target, regardless of distance or difficulty. Mathematics had taught him to calculate trajectories, but wisdom had taught him to choose destinations worth reaching. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.